Well, I see that we're not a large number, but it looks to me like a very appreciative audience from where I'm sitting. The editors, organizers of this volume, this issue of the Journal of Modern Italian Studies, has asked me to open the proceedings, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to do this. It's really wonderful to be back in this room, which has over the past decades hosted many events in which the journal, the JMIS, Journal of Modern Italian Studies, has been involved, and not by chance, because the journal was launched nearly 30 years ago now, in 1995, and the first event that we were involved in was here at the Johns Hopkins Center, I think a year later, 96 or 97. It's not just a matter of institutions, but also perhaps above all people. Adrian Littleton, who's not here this evening, but I hope may be watching us on Zoom, Patrick McCarthy, Gianfranco Pasquino, David Kurtz were amongst the Bolognese who were very actively involved in the launch and promotion of this this journal from the very start. Gianfranco is and has remained ever since member of our editorial board and one of our book review editors. Mark Gilbert, who unfortunately can't be here this evening, is also on the editorial board. So, without laboring the point, I just say that the journal and the Hopkins Center has had and continues to have this very close association. So it really is great to be back here again, and I hope we will be able to do many more of these events in the future. It's secondly a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to introduce, but above all to thank the colleagues sitting on either side of me at the table, Gianfranco Pasquino, to my right, Rosa Mulè, Sofia Ventura, to my left, who not only edited and organized, but had the idea for this issue of the journal under the compelling, provocative title, What is Left of the Italian Left? I suppose that's a question that could be asked pretty much of anywhere, everywhere in Western Europe, with the exception of the post-Brexit United Kingdom, where we are very soon to have a Labour government. How that will work out will be another source of interesting question. But at the moment, the post-Brexit UK does seem to be moving, at least in that respect, contra corrente. And it'll be very interesting, I think, in the course of the discussions this evening, to get some idea of how both the Italian, the Western European cases fit with that, what seems to be that British mismatch. But the focus, the subject of this issue is primarily Italy, and primarily the political developments developments of the last 2 decades. So having said that, I think I have now completed my task of opening the session, thanking the editors, and passing the parola to Professor Mulè.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be back here at the Johns Hopkins after, I really can't say how many years, too many to say. The microphone, sorry. Thanks. It's that one there. Yes, okay. I was just saying that it's a great pleasure to be here back again after so many years. I can't remember how many, because my memory fails me as I am aging. And it's a great pleasure to introduce this special issue, which we thought about it a few years ago, before the victory of the right-wing government in 2022, because this has been going on. The problem of the left in Italy has been going on for a while. And it's really not a surprise that finally we have a right-wing government. It was a surprise that it's led by a woman, the very first woman in Italy to be prime minister. Now, in the special issue, almost as a whole, paints a rather not really uplifting picture of the left in Italy. There is Gianfranco, who will talk about his paper. Really, he says that the left has been unable to renew or rejuvenate its political culture. And this is quite a deep criticism of the state of the art, really. I will talk a little bit more about the papers about the papers whose authors are not here tonight. The paper by James Newell is quite similar to Gianfranco's, although James Newell talks about the PD. The Partito Democratico is the main Italian left-wing party, and he talks about the problem of being a post-ideological party. So that is really, he thinks that unless the Democratic Party reconsiders the significance and relevance of a more equal and cohesive society, there seems to be no future for the left. So it's quite a grim picture, I would say. To view the article, and I won't say very much about it because she will talk about it, she looks at the intricacies of the PD's organizational and political life. And as I said, I would not say much more than this. I would say a little bit more about Fortunato Musella's paper. Now, Fortunato Musella's paper is about the fact that the left in Italy does not seem to be able to catch up with time. So the point of his paper is interesting because he says, well, this is the period in this historical phase. Politics is becoming more personalized. You know, we have the personalization of politics. I know that in the United States, this has been going on for much longer, but in Italy, it's a fairly recent phenomenon. And the other one is the internet, the digitalization of politics. Now, the PD political leaders have been really fierce against the attempts at personalization undertaken by Matteo Renzi. And also they have really resisted digitalization, for example, of the candidate selection process. So here we have two phenomena which are really, it's transformation of society really that we can't really, we have to accept if we want to do politics, that somehow the Democratic Party is unable to catch up with progresses in society. So this is a rather sad paper, I should say. Now, the articles I have talked about until now are looking at the supply side. So what does the PD have to offer? There's another article in this special issue written by Nicola Pasini, Luciano Fasano, and Giovanni Antonio Cerruti. And in that paper, they look at the demand side. So they're looking at voters' preferences. So what's happening? They have very interesting results of a survey they conducted, and what their results show is that left-wing voters have now become much more post-materialist, whereas PD leaders have not. So there's a mismatch between what the elite, the PD elite, thinks, and the vision that the PD leaders have, and the vision that left-wing voters have. So how we get out of this, I don't know. There isn't really an answer in the paper. And then we have another paper because on the radical right, the radical left. Now we know that when the Partito Comunista Italiano disappeared really from the Italian political landscape, there were two splinter parties. One was the Communist Refoundation, Rifondazione Comunista, and the other one was what is now the current PD. Well, that was another real problem in the Italian left, because it did split voters. It did split loyalties. And it split it in a way that it didn't do any good to the left in Italy, because and the paper shows it very well. The Partito della Rifondazione Comunista, Party of Communist Refoundation, actually decided to maintain symbolic continuity with the Communist Party. And it created two significant problems. One was a generational divide. So there were members that had been socialized under the Soviet Union, who kept that kind of vision of the world. But the new generation actually was much more post-materialist. So that was one of the problems. And the other problem was strategic. Are we going to ally or not with the moderate left? So sometimes they decided to ally with the moderate left and participate in the government, join the government coalition, and at the same time not. Then they decided to leave it. So that's the other problem, has been at least, for quite a long time in Italy. Now, as I said, most of the articles, the ones I have presented so far, do paint a rather grim picture of the Italian left. But there is one article that Professor Stefano Tosi and I co-wrote, in which shows that, well, there's one thing that the Italian left has done, a good thing that it's done over the history of the Italian Republic. So we're talking about post-war Italy. And that is that it's the only party that has pushed and tried to implement designs and policies to combat poverty. So if we're looking at the history of minimum income policies in Italy, or policies to combat poverty in Italy, we have to look at what the left-wing party did. And I'm not going to say very much about this, because Stefano then is going to update us on the recent changes in Reddito di Cittadinanza. Now, Italy has been the last country in Europe to have a minimum income. So that tells a lot about the country and the difficulties that the left has had. But this is all I wanted to say. And I'm going to leave the word to Gianfranco, that I know he needs more than I do.
Thank you.
Gianfranco.
Yes. I've been teaching Italian politics in this center from 1976 up to 2000. And there are plenty of students around in the world who still remember the course. Then the course disappeared, and Italian politics, in fact, became less interesting, apparently, to the students as well as to the larger public, if I can put it this way. But Italian politics has, in a way, some interest from many points of view, even though it is not totally different from the politics of Southern European countries. One should not forget, for instance, that there is indeed a left in Spain, and the prime minister is, in fact, a leftist prime minister. There is a left in Portugal. It has lost the election by 1.5%, but it was a good government of the left. There is a left in Greece as well, in a way, and it has governed for some time. So Italy is an exception to the other Southern European countries, for good reasons, I would say, good or if you want bad reasons, for some reasons. Because the ideological divide between the left and especially the communist left and the rest of the Italian political parties was very clear. And when the Berlin Wall fell, it fell on the communists, and almost as a consequence, it fell on the Christian Democrats as well, because the communists could not claim anymore a sort of ideological belonging to a large, important country. And the Christian Democrats were losing immediately those voters who were choosing the Christian Democrats because they were the bulwark against the Communist Party. So it was the crisis of the two major parties related to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And the fact is that exactly because they were monopolizing the opposition of the Communist Party and monopolizing the government, the Christian Democrats, they had not renewed their ideology. So when the Berlin Wall fell, there was no renewal of the ideology, no renewal of the ideas, if you want. I call them political cultures, which seems to be something intermediate, not so rigid as an ideology, as not so weak, so light as ideas. And this has been a problem. The problem, some on the left had thought that they could solve the problem by creating a party being at the same time post-communist, whatever that means, and post-Christian Democrats. That is the Democratic Party. I remember, say, personal experiences are sometimes interesting. I was present at the birth of the Partito Democratico in Florence, Campo di Marte, which is a good place because you can get there by train from Bologna. And so I was there, and they were weeping because they were abandoning the party of the past and so on and so on. But there was no new idea. And it's very difficult to define what the Democratic Party stands for. It was a sort of merger of two political classes, two political groups, two ruling groups, but nothing more. If one is looking for the ideology of the Democratic Party, there is nothing to be found because nothing was formulated. My point was that they were unable to formulate anything because they were secure in their positions, and so they did not feel the need to produce ideas. And this is where they are. Some of the papers on the Democratic Party say this. I still remember what D'Alema, who is at the same time, let's see, I can put it, who considers himself the most intelligent man on the left, and there is someone who considers himself the most intelligent man on the right, defined the Democratic Party a botched fact, a botched result, un amalgama mal riuscito. And he was right for many reasons. Still, the amalgama mal riuscito is indispensable. At some point in time, I was in a meeting in the US when a famous politician said that the US should be considered the indispensable nation. The Democratic Party is the indispensable party because in spite of all the problems it has, it represents something. And it still is the largest party of the left, around 20%, which is a very small percentage by comparison with the Spaniards, with the Portuguese, with the Greeks, and with other left-wing parties in Europe. But the problem is that it occupies a space. It has voters. I would not say believers, but voters. And since it has no ideology, you can choose the party if you feel more or less to be on the left. That is the Democratic Party. But there is no culture and no attempt to renew the culture, no attempt to find something that might recreate a political culture. I believe I've said somewhere in the paper that one ought to formulate a European political culture, and in fact we will see if they are capable of doing this, because there are the elections for the European Parliament early June, and we'll see how they define their positions vis-a-vis the Europe that exists and the Europe to be created. But there is not very much that I can see. All this said, this is a complicated situation because on the right, this is what is that of the left. Next time, perhaps we should say something what is left of the right. And we cannot make the play of words, but there is a lot on the right, and there is also something resembling in ideology. It is the Fratelli d'Italia, the party of the Prime Minister, has something resembling in ideology. In any case, it is a political culture that has long roots in the past that are not forgotten, and Fratelli d'Italia are utilized, I would say, appropriately, which explains why the party is between 25 and 30% of the votes, which is a lot. So what is going on is that there is an unequal battle between a center right and especially an extreme right that has an ideology, or as I said, a political culture, and the left, which is somewhat trying to revive communism, which is impossible. Rifondazione Comunista is something that, again, it is a group of people who are winning seats, and they are content with that, satisfied with that. And other politicians, other professional politicians, even though professional is a compliment from this point of view, because it is what they do. It is not that they are really professionals, but it is what they do. And therefore, there is a sort of a very unequal battle. I have no solution for that. Usually, when there is a non-Italian public, I say that Italy is a very interesting case for those who study politics, because it offers very many examples of things not to do, not to be done, and of mistakes and so on. So it is very interesting for the foreigners, and it is very depressive for the citizens, very depressing. I keep my depression and go on studying it.
Thank you, Gianfranco. I leave the floor to Sofia.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I apologize for my English, as I'm not very fluent, but I hope you can understand my brief speech. In my article, I highlighted a series of weaknesses of the Democratic Party, the main party of the Italian left. I also stressed some factors as the basis of these weaknesses. For example, the broader crisis affecting European socialist parties, the origins of the Democratic Party in 2007, and as Gianfranco has already noted, the origin was marked by emerging between organizations and cultures that were quite different. The left-wing Catholic and post-communist factions. And another important element, in my opinion, that can explain the many problems of the Democratic Party since its inception regard the strategic decisions made by the leaders of the Democratic Party in the different moments of its life. Which are these weaknesses? I stress in particular the organizational dimension, even if strictly linked to the organizational dimension, there is the cultural dimension, that is the political identity of the party, that it was an issue that was afforded by Gianfranco. Regarding the identity, the political identity, I think that the main problem has always been the vagueness of this political identity. And regarding the institutional dimension, the problem has always been the low level of institutionalization. accompanied by a constant fragmentation into factions. Factions dominated by oligarchs, single personalities that we can name oligarchs, and moreover, this party during the secretariat, during the leadership of Matteo Renzi, also has now a process of strong personalization that has further weakened the institutional framework. And I stress this element because I think that also the secretary, the actual secretary, Eli Schlein, is trying to personalize the Democratic Party. And furthermore, I stress that at the same time, together with all these weaknesses, the Democratic Party has now a constant decline, a steady decline of its consensus, and also the incapacity to attract the popular vote. And I think that it's a very important thing for a leftist party. The Democratic Party has always have a weak capacity to attract the vote of workers, of the more marginal segment of the society. And it's worth noting that this kind of voters have been attracted increasingly by the far right, the radical right in Italy. And the situation now is exactly that. And in the meanwhile, the party has always oscillated between more reformist or more laborist positions without never reaching an equilibrium within the organization. The weak institutionalization is linked to the origins, as I said, but also I think to the effort to create an open party, perhaps a too much open party, with primaries and elections for the secretary open to the supporters, not only to the members of the party, and I think that is a very important element. But I think that there was another problem linked to this one. That is the fact that the Democratic Party was created, originated exactly in the last part of the so-called Second Republic, that had a bipolar competition, party competition. And so, with its openness, the Democratic Party tried to adapt itself to this new system, trying to be one of the pillars of this bipolar system. But unfortunately, we were in the final part of this phase, dominated by the bipolar competition, and thanks also to a anti-politics climate, was emerging another pole, a third pole, represented in particular by the Pasca movement, the populist Pasca movement. So the Democratic Party tried to shape itself for a system that were winning. So it was quite unfortunate. And another point that I think is important regard, as I said, the choice of the party leaders. the party leaders, after the defeat of the Democratic Party in 2008, and I must remember that in 2008 the party was led by Walter Veltroni, who had this project of a party at majoritarian vocation, that is a party able to win a competition alone or leading a little coalition. This project was conceived as a failed project due to the defeat of 2008 and some other defeats, the regional election, for example. So after the resignation of Walter Veltroni, the idea was abandoned, with a partial exception, but only partial exception of Matteo Renzi. So after the 2008, the party leaders made, first of all, the effort to create alliance or to enter into alliance in order to holding or conquering the power of government. So I think that they made a choice, thinking that to be at the government was always the best choice, renouncing in some case to accept competition and create an organization able to win. To dominate the political scene and win a competition. And in this way, they behave as actors of a typical Carter party. And I think that the Carter party is exactly a definition very appropriate for the Democratic Party. Okay, what's happening now? So I have resumed the situation of the Democratic Party up to now. 1 year ago, on February 2023, Elly Schlein was elected as secretary of the Democratic Party. And the question now is if all the problems that have characterized the Democratic Party up to this point can be overcome by Elly Schlein or not. My hypothesis is or not. Not. In fact, we can observe that all the main problem typical of the Democratic Party remains, but in certain cases have been exacerbated. For example, Elly Schlein campaigned promising to end with factionalism. But now we can observe that factionalism is a strong characteristic of the Democratic Party. And for example, we have seen this during the preparation of the candidature for the European elections. And in this occasion, we have observed the conflict between an effort of personalization made by Elly Schlein and the resistance of the in Italian we say cacicchi, I don't know how the oligarchs as head of the different factions. So the fragmentation, the factions continue to be a problem. Also the effort of personalization is limited by this conflict, but is anyway a reality, and also have deinstitutionalizing consequences. And And another element is also, and I conclude on this, is that the profile of Eddie Schlein continue to attract a vote of middle class, of urban middle class, educated urban middle class, and even if she appears very leftist compared to other leaders, she appears enabled, also she appears to be enabled to attract new voters, in particular popular vote. So the final sentence perhaps is that the Democratic Party today appears enabled to represent an alternative to the strong right-wing presence in Italy.
Thank you, Sofia. Now, Stefano, perhaps would like to join us on the table. And Stefano will talk about the paper that, as I said, that we co-wrote. Let me just say a word or two before I leave the word to Stefano.
Rosa, il microfono.
Scusa. Sorry.
Non si sente.
No, I just wanted to say a word or two about this research we did together. We were very surprised that it was the first time that some academics decided to write the history of minimum income policy in Italy. There's no history, it's only the one we wrote. So you have to take it as the word. There's nothing else. So the history of minimum income policy, the role of the left in minimum income policy in Italy, but not only the role of the left. In this paper, we only wrote about the role of the left, but we discovered that there wasn't really a historian, an economic historian, who decided to write about minimum income policy in Italy. So there's a whole field of unspoiled territory, as we say, over there. Please, Stefano.
Thank you, Rosa. I do apologize for my bad English and also for reading my notes, but I will try to give a less pessimistic view on the role of the left. The aim of our paper, written by Rosa, was to examine the role of the Italian left in tracing the troubled, tormented path leading Italy, the last in the European Union to do so, to put in place a minimum income scheme. By a minimum income scheme, we mean a means-tested cash transfer to the poor as such, conditional upon participation in active labor market programs. So in our work, we analyzed the Italian left's contribution to the minimum income policy by breaking down Italy's political history in 3 different periods. The first one, covering the period from the late 40s to the early 90s, examines the left's role in contributing to policy status quo due to a polarized multi-party system. The second period focuses on the 2 decades spanning the turn of the new millennium, when center-left governments launched the first pilot minimum income scheme. Finally, the third period focuses on the last decade, which was characterized by the tripolar political competition between the center-left, the center-right, and the Movimento 5 Stelle. In the paper, basically, we argue that until the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Italian left focused on labor market insiders, that is, full-time workers, and appeared largely unconcerned about the poor. According to that view, which was supported also by the trade unions, economic poverty and the welfare policies to combat it, far from being a field of action for the class struggle, represented a sort of rearguard policy, useful only for stabilizing capitalism. It was not until the early 70s that the left-wing party press and political documents addressed the poverty issue. The second period of the Italian path towards a minimum income scheme runs from 1992 to 2013. and it shows a slow but progressive strategic change among the Italian left. The Italian Communist Party reconsidered its political goals by moving closer to the social democratic ideology of Northern Europe. What is more, in the same period, progress towards European integration encouraged EU member states to collect comparable statistics, which helped to raise policymakers' awareness of poverty. It is thanks to the left-wing governments at the turn of the new millennium, the governments ruled by Prodi, D'Alema, and D'Amato, that the first pilot minimum income scheme, named the Reddito Minimo di Inserimento, was implemented. That scheme had positive effects on the most severe cases of poverty. However, the determined unwillingness of the subsequent center-right government to refinance the Reddito Minimo di Inserimento silenced for almost a decade the national policy and public debate on minimum income scheme. The only experience of a pseudo minimum income scheme implemented by the right-wing government was under the last Berlusconi government, who put in place the Carta Acquisti, the so-called social card, a welfare program that in fact moved away from the minimum income models. Let's come now to the third and final period of our historical analysis. The left crucial push towards a minimum income scheme took place 10 years ago, approximately, when the Italian political landscape changed dramatically following the results of the Italian general election in 2013. The electoral success of the five-star movement, of the Movimento 5 Stelle, gave rise to a form of triangular competition between the center-left coalition, led by the PD, the center-right coalition, and the Movimento 5 Stelle, which became a credible threat to both coalitions. The Movimento 5 Stelle flagship policy was, as we know, the Reddito di Cittadinanza, which, despite the name, was means-tested and not unconditional. Therefore, it should not be confused with the universal basic income. The political response to the Movimento 5 Stelle proposal was the introduction in 1217 of the Reddito di Inclusione, the inclusion income, which was the result of a project conceived at the time of the Monti government and carried forward by the two subsequent left-wing governments under Enrico Letta and Matteo Renzi, but put in place only under the Gentiloni government. The inclusion income, the Reddito di Inclusione, was a measure theoretically well-designed but underfunded, though it represented the first national scheme of minimum income in our country. Whatever its limits, the inclusion income, the Reddito di Inclusione, paved the way for further development of a minimum income policy under the populist governing coalition consisting of the Movimento 5 Stelle and the League, which in fact, as you know, in 2019, implemented the Reddito di Cittadinanza, the most significant public transfer in favor of the poor ever made in Italy. In conclusion, we argue that although the left cannot claim credit for the introduction of the universal minimum income policy on a scale comparable to that in place in the main European countries, because, as I said, the Reddito di Inclusione was underfunded, nevertheless, the initiation, the design, and first national implementation of a minimum income policy did stem from left-wing governments. It was asked by Rosa to refer very briefly also to the very recent reform implemented by the Meloni government. So let me say two words about this reform. The advent of the center-right Meloni government effected a policy reversal in the Italian minimum income policy by reintroducing categorical criteria for eligibility to income support. The Meloni government replaced the Reddito di Cittadinanza with two new schemes, the inclusion allowance, so-called assegno di inclusione, and the support for training and work, so-called supporto per la formazione e il lavoro. These two schemes marked a step backwards by refuting the principle of targeting within universalism that had characterized the Reddito di Cittadinanza and also before it, the Reddito di Inclusione and also the Reddito Minimo di Inserimento. Both the assegno di inclusione and the supporto per la formazione del lavoro cannot be defined as minimum income measures, basically for two reasons. The former is granted only to poor households with members who are either disabled or minors or age 60 and over. The latter is a monetary benefit which, with the non-renewable maximum duration of 12 months, that is granted only to individuals aged between 18 and 59 who participate in work activation programs. Therefore, the reintroduction of categorical criteria will considerably drop the number of beneficiaries, and this may significantly save resources for the public budget, but will inevitably weaken the fight against absolute poverty in Italy.
Thank you very much. So one good thing the Italian left did is being reversed by the current right-wing government. Are there any questions?
Inventare il microfono, devi spegnere quello là e quello.
Sorry. Are there any questions in the audience or at home?
I was really interested in something you said about the demand side. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was very, very interested in what you said about the demand side of the discrepancy between what the party leaders seem to believe in and what the voters seem to believe in. And what I would like to know is you mentioned it was a reduction in their views of materialism. And can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
This is a paper that I suggest you read. It's because the reason why I'm saying this is because the results that the authors analyze are very interesting. Well, basically, it's a description of the preferences. If you have a party that, each of the papers in this special issue, except our paper, show that the left in Italy is unfortunately looking backwards. That's a real problem, right? They don't seem to have a forward-looking vision. So if that is really the case, I mean, this is our interpretation in this special issue. Somebody else might say it's not the case, but that's what we think. Well, if this is the case, and also the data show it, and the survey on voters show that voters are looking forward. They're not interested in the past. That's the history of the Communist Party. That's the history of the left-wing party. They want to have a vision. They want to have a future, right? So when we talk about post-materialist values, if that's what you were thinking about, what the literature means by this is that they want to have post-materialist is looking at its values that are not only linked to economic well-being. Right, so it's okay, it's okay, it's necessary to live, but it's not the only indicator of a happy life. That's what post-materialism means, right? So it's the quality of the job that matters as much. It's the time that we have left to do whatever we like to do. To be with our families, perhaps, or maybe not, maybe reading a book, or just go on holidays, or have a life that it's not only devoted to have a greater, bigger income. That's what post-materialist values mean. That's the definition that has been given. And what seems that political leaders in the Italian left, in the PD in particular, the survey was on the Partito Democratico, don't seem to catch up. This is on the demand side, but they don't seem to catch up also, as the paper by Fortunato Musella was showing, that they don't seem to catch up also with the progress that society on the whole is making, with the digital revolution, the personalization of politics. I mean, you can't really fight against these kind of phenomena. There are phenomena of the transformation of society. You have to go with it. You have to go with the grain. In this case, I'm not saying always, but in this case. And also, there seems to be not a non-understanding of the importance. And digitalization can be progress. You don't really have to be afraid of that. I mean, I find, for example, I was talking with my colleague Sofia as we were walking here, and we were talking about chat GPT. And I was telling her, I'm in love with this because it just saves you so much time. And so, did I answer your question?
Thank you for not a lecture, a seminar. I have a few different questions. I'm a little confused because it sounds like the post-materialistic characterization of the left that you're giving now sounds like the definition of left in Italy has definitely evolved, and I think parties inherently evolve. But this, to me, as classic leftist, sounds not left like the left that I know, perhaps. So maybe I need to read a bit more about Italian left party in Italy. But what explains the vagueness of the political identity? I think Professor Ventura discussed. And also, when you were discussing the factionalization of the left and how it's split up, it sounds a lot like Mark Lilla's description of the future of the left and how it's unable to produce anything tangible. But you also mentioned that it's become very based in single oligarchs, but at the base of left parties, that's not necessarily what characterizes them, since they're pretty focused on collective struggle. So I don't know, this is a few different ideas in one kind of question and analysis, but just to summarize it. So what would describe the vagueness of the political identity and what causes this? And why is the party now unable to produce anything tangible? And the other, I just thought of this as well, the other thing that I'm thinking about is the right wing and populist parties in Europe have extremely weaponized migration as a subject. And this is perhaps one of the reasons that it's very hard to fight them, because if you already have underlying economic issues, the biggest and easiest scapegoats for populists and the average, citizen or farmer is migrants. So how could a left party in the common Europe or Italy now even begin to produce something tangible when there's so much fear mongering and misinformation when it comes to elections and such? Sorry, this is a lot of questions.
There are questions there. I think we're going to leave the question on the vagueness of the political culture and to factionalization, maybe to Gianfranco Pasquino and Sofia Ventura. But I don't want to leave out your very interesting question on the issue of migration and what the left could or should do about it, because I think it's a very interesting question and it touches a problem of the present and the future. But I first will leave the floor to my colleagues.
Well, the issue of factions, I think, is not really well posed, because now they are accused with this Spanish word cacique of being individuals who create a sort of relatively small structure pursuing fundamentally economic and social benefits for themselves and the members of the faction, which is not true. This is not the factions I see in the Democratic Party. There are some individuals who acquired a lot of visibility, some of them because they have real capabilities. For instance, one of them is Franceschini, who was a very good minister of culture, and he has some followers. And so it is a traditional grouping of individuals having a leader who is capable of protecting them protecting their careers, finding jobs when necessary and so on, but without necessarily resorting to that type of limited corruption that usually cacique can utilize and have utilized in several countries. So I would reject the idea that the factions are factions of power. They're factions led by individuals for purposes of retaining their position, but in some cases also for articulating ideas. But this is the problem, because they in fact control the internal life of the party, and they control the leadership. The leadership has never been so good and so strong to be capable to overcome the demands of these party factional leaders. And so the idea that they project is a party divided, a party unable to produce a sort of a vision, let me say, or a coherent strategy. Sofia was at one point, I think, trying to tell you how many party leaders the Democratic Party has had, several of them. They're usually not very strong, or they appear to be very strong at the beginning, and in fact they were never really very strong. What is interesting is their trajectory after having been party leaders. Petroni is now a columnist, an editorial writer for Il Corriere della Sera. He writes books, in some cases detective stories. He is a preacher, I would put it this way, from many points of view. And the others have fundamentally disappeared. It's very difficult to remember what they've done after that, with one exception, Renzi, who has moved to the center, some would even say to the right, and retained some blackmailing power, but no more than that. So this is the party we see. But I would reject the idea that it is a party in which there is a sort of permanent vein of limited petty corruption. No, this is not the case.
Okay, two things, factions and the identity. Concerning the factions, I not so optimistic like Gianfranco, because I think that actually the faction in the Democratic Party today represents a sort of tribes. And also, I remember that, for example, one of the head of a former head of a tribe, that is Massimo D'Alema, defined tribes, the different groups of the Democratic Party. And I think that the reality today is really a group of tribes that don't work together. They don't work together, but are also able, and about this I agree with you, to control the leadership. Not only to control the leadership, but also to permit to the leadership to emerge. Because Eli Schlein, the election of Eli Schlein was allowed by a decision made by Enrico Letta, his predecessor, and other leaders of the party. So, and the impression that we have observed in the Democratic Party today is that really is not an organization united where you can work together, but it's really divided in different groups, and this has been quite clear during the elaboration of the list of the candidates of the European elections. As to the problem of the identity, Gianfranco Pasquino already spoke about it. I think that the vagueness depends first of all on the fact that many leaders, I'm really negative about it, but many leaders of the Democratic Party were more interested in safeguard their role and the role of their group than in the elaboration of political ideas. Secondly, there has been an oscillation between more reformist, in Italy we speak of reformist center-left positions, stances, and more laborist positions. But also, I think that today there is another problem, another question. Rosa spoke about materialist values and post-materialist values, and the difficulty of the Democratic Party to adapt itself to the future, to the values of the future and post-materialist values. My impression is that is not able also to adapt to the new materialist values, that is, those values regarding the welfare of the new disadvantaged of the society, the loser of the globalization. You spoke about migration, for example. So I think that regarding the post-materialist values, now in the Democratic Party, there is a leader that stresses a lot the post-materialist values, but there are essentially values regarding gender, some aspect of the post-materialist values, not the adaptation to the modernity. Hedy Schlein today is propose also another way to conceive the left, but I think that even this kind of conceive, the new kind of conceive the left, don't catch the real problems of the potential voters of the left that continue to vote for the right.
I think we'll have to leave the answer to your question for another time, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time. So maybe we'll have another seminar on other topics. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you for your questions. And thank you to John Davis that has accepted our special issue and has worked with us very proficiently and has helped us through the process.
It is really good too, worth reading.
Thank you.
So, yeah.